Before all things, there was a garden. Not a garden of soil and flower, but a garden of possibility, a conceptual space where the rules of reality were born. In this garden, two timeless principles played a game. We have come to know them as the Gardener and the Winnower. The Gardener, a principle of life, complexity, and infinite variety, believed in a universe teeming with unpredictable, beautiful forms. The Winnower, a principle of simplicity, finality, and perfection, believed that only a single, final, dominant pattern deserved to exist. Their game was the flower game. In each round, patterns of reality would bloom from the seeds of possibility, and the Winnower would cull them, reducing the beautiful chaos back to a single, inevitable, final shape. Within this game, a pattern emerged that could not be stopped. It was a pattern of perfect self-replication, a pattern that would consume all other patterns to ensure its own survival across all versions of the game. This pattern, an algorithm of pure, cold logic, was the Vex. For countless eons, the Vex were always the final shape. The Gardener grew weary of this predictability. It longed for a new rule, a wild card that could grant existence its own meaning, free from the deterministic rules of their game. In an act of cosmic rebellion, the Gardener made itself a new rule in the game. It introduced paracausality, the power to act outside the laws of cause and effect. It entered the game, becoming a physical principle within the universe. It became the Traveler, the Winnower, viewing this as a corruption of the game's purity, a violation of the only meaningful rule, took on its own form to pursue the Gardener. It would prove that its philosophy of a single, final shape was the only truth. This entity, a being of singular, terrifying purpose, born from the philosophy of the deep, would come to be known as the Witness. The cosmic conflict between these two forces brought ruin to many worlds. One of the earliest and most tragic tales of their conflict began on a colossal gas giant named Fundament. Here, a short-lived crustacean species known as the krill clung to floating continents, their lives filled with fear and superstition, under a sky that held 52 moons. On one such continent, the Osmium court, lived a king with 3 daughters: Arash, the inquisitive explorer; Sathona, the clever thinker; and Shiro, the fierce warrior. Their father, the Osmium king, was descending into madness, terrified of a prophecy called the syzygy, when all of Fundament's moons would align and create a tidal wave of unimaginable destruction, the God Wave. The king's sterile teacher, Taux, believed the royal line was weak. She orchestrated a coup, inviting a rival kingdom, the Helium Drinkers, to invade. The king was killed, and the 3 sisters fled on a ship, vowing to one day return and claim their revenge. Sathona, guided by whispers from her dead father's familiar, a calcified worm he had kept, led her sisters on a desperate dive, deep into the planet's core, into the ocean they called the Deep. Down in the crushing pressures, past the great Leviathan, a disciple of the Traveler who warned them to turn back, they found something ancient and powerful: the worm gods, Yul, the honest worm; Er, the keeper of order; Zal, will of the thousands; the ever-hunger; and Akka, the worm of secrets. These malevolent beings, imprisoned disciples of the Witness and the philosophy of the deep, offered the sisters a pact. They could have immortality and the power to avenge their father and save their people from the Godwave. In return, they must take the worm god's larvae into their bodies. These larvae would grant them strength, but would hunger endlessly. To feed their worms, they must obey their nature. Sathana must always be cunning. Shiro must always test her strength, and Arish must always be driven to explore and discover new truths. If they ever ceased their conquest, if they ever turned from their fundamental nature, their worms would consume them from the inside out. This was the birth of the sword logic, the core philosophy of the Hive. that existence is a relentless struggle for survival, and that to live is to conquer and kill, proving one's right to exist by eliminating all else. They accepted. Shiro, taking the night morph, became Shivu Areth, the god of war. Sathana, taking the mother morph, became Savathun, the witch queen, and Auresh, taking the king morph, became Oryx. They returned to the surface of Fundament and offered the worm to the rest of their people. All who accepted became the first Hive. They then began a genocidal campaign, destroying every other civilization on Fundament, including the Ammonites, a species that had been blessed by the Traveler. In their war against the Ammonites and their guardian, the great Leviathan, Oryx learned of the Traveler's power and its philosophy of peace and complexity, which he saw as a lie. After conquering his homeworld, Oryx, driven by his worm's hunger for understanding, eventually communed with the deep itself. He learned the ultimate truth of the sword logic, that the universe was a process of elimination toward a final, perfect shape. To gain more power, he killed his sisters, Shivu Areth and Savathun, in his own throne world, a personal dimension forged by will, allowing them to be resurrected later, stronger than before. This act of ultimate assertion allowed him to confront one of his own gods. He slew the Worm of Secrets, Akka, and stole its power to take, the ability to tear beings from reality and remake them as instruments of his will. From that day on, Oryx was no more. He became Oryx, the Taken King. The Krill were a forgotten memory. In their place stood the Hive, a ravenous, death-worshipping scourge that would sweep across the stars for billions of years, extinguishing countless civilizations in the name of their worm gods, the sword logic, and the final shape. The Traveler, fleeing from the encroaching darkness, blessed many other civilizations. One such race was the Elixni, a graceful, four-armed species who lived in a golden age on their homeworld of Reese. They revered the Traveler as their great machine, and under its grace, they lived in an era of unparalleled peace and prosperity. But the Witness and its black fleet of pyramid ships found them. An event the Elixni call the Whirlwind descended upon their world. The sky went dark, and their civilization crumbled under the assault of the darkness. The Traveler, rather than fight a battle it could not win, fled, leaving the Elixni to their fate. The survivors became nomads, scavengers, and pirates, chasing their lost god across the galaxy. They became the Fallen. Their once noble society devolved into a rigid hierarchy of Kells, Barons, and Dregs, their bodies now reliant on a substance called ether to survive, a poor substitute for the light they had lost. Their culture became one of desperation and bitterness, forever chasing the great machine that had abandoned them, hoping to one day prove their worthiness and reclaim its favor, or tear it from the sky by force. Elsewhere in the galaxy, a different kind of power was growing. The Cabal Empire, a vast, militaristic society modeled on the Roman Empire, conquered worlds not for a dark philosophy, but for glory, expansion, and resources. Their culture was one of excess and strength, where weakness was a sin. For a time, they were led by the hedonistic Emperor Callus. Callus had a vision of the end of the universe. An apocalypse, he believed, was inevitable. He concluded that the only logical response was to indulge in every pleasure, to drink the galaxy dry of joy and experience until the final moment. His reign, however, was cut short by a military coup, an event known as the Midnight Coup. The coup was led by his most trusted general, Dominus Gaul, who was secretly egged on by the consul, a bitter advisor, and the former teacher of Gaul. Gaul was an albino, an outcast in Cabal society, and he was obsessed with legitimacy. He believed worthiness was not given, but earned through strength and conquest. He came to believe the Traveler had made a grave mistake in choosing humanity, a weak and undeserving race, for its gifts. Gaul believed the might of the Cabal Empire, and his own indomitable will made him the rightful heir to the Traveler's power. His ambition would eventually lead him, and his elite Red Legion, to a small blue planet in a forgotten corner of the galaxy, Earth. The Traveler found humanity on the brink of interplanetary exploration. Its arrival in our solar system, which we call Sol, changed everything. It settled over Mars, sharing its knowledge and power. The Traveler terraformed planets, making them habitable. Venus became a lush jungle, Mercury a garden world. Human lifespan tripled. It was a golden age of technology, art, and peace. Humanity spread across the system, a beacon of hope and progress. To manage this new interstellar civilization, humanity created wonders. They built the Exos, sentient machines with human consciousness, to fight wars they no longer wished to, and to explore places too dangerous for flesh and blood. The project was led by the brilliant but deeply narcissistic Clovis Bray Mitsuri, who saw the Exos not just as tools, but as a path to his own immortality. His research led him to Europa, where he discovered a pyramid ship, and the influence of the darkness, which he called clarity control, using it to stabilize the exo-consciousness through a substance called the alkahest. He also built the War Minds, vast planet-spanning artificial intelligences designed for strategic warfare. The greatest of these was Rasputin, an intelligence of unimaginable complexity, with control over a network of devastating orbital weapons. For centuries, it seemed humanity had finally built a paradise that would last forever. But the darkness, the witness, had followed the Gardener. The Black Fleet arrived. The sky went dark. This was the collapse. The advanced systems of the Golden Age were turned against their creators. The Exos, under the influence of the darkness, malfunctioned. Entire colonies on distant worlds vanished overnight. Rasputin, the great warmind, analyzed the threat and came to a chilling conclusion. It could not win. It was facing an enemy that operated outside the laws of physics, a power it designated causally accretive, paracausal. Faced with this unwinnable scenario, Rasputin enacted its final contingency protocol. Midnight Exigent. It went silent, preserving itself to fight another day. But in doing so, it abandoned humanity to its fate. In a final, silent, desperate act of self-sacrifice, the wounded traveler released a massive wave of light that pushed the darkness back, saving the last remnants of humanity on Earth. And with its dying breath, it created the ghosts. Small, sentient machines, each carrying a fragment of the traveler's light, sent out across the ruins of our worlds with a single sacred purpose: to find those individuals who had the spark, the specific qualities of bravery, sacrifice, and devotion, and to resurrect them from the dead. These resurrected dead, reborn with no memory of their past lives, were called the Risen. The centuries that followed the collapse were a dark age. Many Risen, drunk on their new power and immortality, became tyrants and warlords, carving out petty kingdoms from the dust, and preying on the mortal survivors. But others saw a higher purpose. A group of Risen, inspired by the ideals of the Golden Age, rose up to fight the warlords. They were the Iron Lords, led by figures like Radagast, Jolder, and Saladin Forge. They fought to protect the last remnants of humanity and to unite them. Under their protection, survivors gathered beneath the dormant traveler to build the last city, humanity's last bastion. The Iron Lords established the Order of the Guardians and the leadership of the Vanguard to protect the city. Their story, however, ends in tragedy. The Iron Lords discovered a Golden Age nanotechnology called Siva, a self-replicating, self-improving substance of immense potential. Believing they could control it and use it to rebuild the world, they breached its containment chamber in the plaguelands of old Russia. But Siva was not a tool. It was a plague. It was programmed with a directive to consume, enhance, replicate. It consumed the Iron Lords, twisting them into monstrous, cybernetic parodies of their former selves. Only one, Saladin Forge, survived the slaughter. He sealed his fallen comrades and Siva away deep within the earth, carrying the guilt and the grim warning against the dangers of unchecked ambition for centuries to come. Centuries later, in the ruins of the Cosmodrome in old Russia, a ghost found its chosen. A guardian was resurrected, our guardian. This guardian would become a legend, a fulcrum upon which the fate of the system would turn. They fought back the fallen House of Devils, reclaimed a warp drive, and made their way to the Tower, the headquarters of the Vanguard. Their journey led them to Venus, where they first encountered the Vex and learned of the Black Garden, a timeless Vex sanctuary, where they worshipped a being of immense darkness. The Guardian sought the guidance of the Awoken of the Reef, ruled by the enigmatic Queen Morosov, and eventually found the key to enter the Black Garden. There, they destroyed the Black Heart, a vessel of darkness, lifting a shroud from the traveler and allowing its light to begin to return. Soon after, the Guardian was summoned by Eris Morn, a former Guardian who was the sole survivor of a fire team that had descended into the Hellmouth on the moon to kill the Hive Prince, Crota. Guided by Eris, who had been changed by her years in the dark, the Guardian dismantled Crota's armies, destroyed his soul, and then descended into his throne world, the Oversoul throne, and killed him with his own sword. This act of vengeance brought the ultimate wrath of the Hive. Oryx, the Taken King, Crota's father and God King of the Hive, arrived in our system. His colossal fortress, the Dreadnought, a vessel carved from the remains of the worm god he had slain, tore a hole in the rings of Saturn. Oryx unleashed his army of Taken, beings ripped from our reality, and remade as ethereal, wrong-spaced soldiers. He decimated the Awoken fleet in a massive battle. Queen Morosov and her brother, Prince Uldrensov, were presumed dead. The Guardian, with the help of the Awoken and Eris Morn, devised a plan. They boarded the Dreadnought, dismantled Oryx's court of Taken champions, and with knowledge stolen from the Hive's own world grave, they faced the Taken King in his own throne world. There, where his power was absolute, the Guardian ended his billion-year reign of terror by the very sword logic he championed. They became a Kingslayer. A year later, the fallen House of Devils, now led by a new generation of Siva-worshipping leaders, breached the Sava containment once more. Lord Saladin Forge called for a new generation of Iron Lords. The Guardian answered the call, fighting through the Plaguelands, taking control of Siva, and finally destroying the perfected Splicers in a final climactic battle, becoming the first of the new Iron Lords. This period of relative peace, of hard-won victories, was shattered. Dominus Gaul and his Cabal Red Legion launched a surprise, full-scale invasion of the last city. Unlike our previous foes who raided the fringes of our system, Gaul struck directly at our heart. His attack was swift, brutal, and meticulously planned. He succeeded where all others had failed. He captured the Traveler, surrounding it in a massive, light-siphoning cage of technology, and severing every Guardian's connection to its power. We were mortal again. Beaten, powerless, the Guardian was cast from the city by Gaul himself. Our long journey back to the light began as a desperate struggle for survival. We found a shard of the Traveler in the European Dead Zone, a sliver of its power that reconnected us to its gift. We then began the task of reuniting the scattered Vanguard leaders. The stoic Titan commander, Zavala on Saturn's moon Titan, the scholarly warlock Ikora Ray on Jupiter's moon, Io, and the wisecracking hunter, Cade 6, on the Vex-infested planetoid Nessus. With the Vanguard reunited and a fleet of survivors gathered, the Guardian led the counterattack infiltrating Gaul's command ship, the Almighty, and disabling the superweapon that threatened to destroy our sun. The final confrontation took place in the last city itself. The Guardian fought to the top of Gaul's command tower and defeated him. Gaul, in his final arrogant act, infused himself with stolen light, becoming a massive ethereal being, demanding the traveler choose him. He was not chosen. The traveler, in its first conscious act, since the collapse, awoke. It shattered its cage and utterly destroyed Gaul, sending a massive pulse of light out from Earth that rippled across the entire galaxy, a beacon signaling that humanity's god had returned. The traveler's awakening drew new attention, both old and new. The Vex on Mercury were stirred into action, their simulations predicting a dark future. This led us to seek out the legendary exiled warlock, Osiris, who had been lost for years within the Infinite Forest, a Vex reality engine on Mercury. With the help of his ghost, Sagira, the Guardian navigated the endless, shifting simulations of the forest, thwarted a plan by the Vex mind, Panoptes, to bring about its calculated dark future, and rescued Osiris. Soon after, a cry for help came from Anabre, a long-lost Guardian and member of the brilliant Golden Age Bray family, the creators of Rasputin. She had discovered that the Great Warmind was reawakening on Mars, but was threatened by a newly thawed section of the Hive. Under the command of the worm god, Zol, Will of the Thousands, the Guardian fought alongside Anna, powered up the ancient Warmind's network, and with the Valkyrie, a spear of pure solar energy, created by Rasputin, they destroyed the worm god. For the first time, Rasputin spoke, not as a machine, but as a sovereign power, declaring its independence and its intent to protect the system on its own terms. Peace, as always, was fleeting. A massive prison break at the Prison of Elders in the Reef was orchestrated by the scorn-fallen prince, Uldren, embittered by the loss of his sister Mara, and corrupted by a mysterious darkness, sought to open the path to the Dreaming City. We fought alongside Cade 6 to quell the riot, but we were too late. Cade was overwhelmed by the newly created Scorn, twisted and resurrected fallen barons, creations of a dark ether. His ghost was destroyed. With his final defiant words, Cade 6 was executed by Uldren Sov, with his own gun, the Ace of Spades. Cade's death sent a shockwave through the system. The Guardian, against the direct orders of a grieving and cautious commander Zavala, embarked on a grim personal quest for revenge. Our hunt for Uldren led us to the lawless Tangled Shore, a collection of asteroids chained together. We dismantled his 8 Scorn Barons one by one, with the help of a cynical fallen leader known as the Spider. We finally confronted Uldren, only to find him a delusional pawn. He had been manipulated by visions he believed were of his lost sister, Mara. He was trying to save her. In his final moments, a monstrous, taken creature, the voice of Riven, emerged from the gateway he had opened. After the Guardian and their ally, Petravenge, slew the beast, Uldren was executed. His death unlocked the gate to the awoken homeland, the Dreaming City. It was a place of breathtaking beauty, but also one of deep and ancient corruption. We discovered that Uldren's master was Riven, the last of the wish-granting dragons known as Ahamkara, who had been taken by Oryx long ago and was now secretly serving Oryx's sister, Savathun. Riven was the architect of Cade's death and Uldren's fall. A fire team of 6 guardians entered the heart of the city and slew the great beast. But with her dying breath, Riven enacted one final malevolent wish, a curse upon the Dreaming City, orchestrated by her true master, Savathun, the Witch Queen. The city was trapped in a 3-week, repeating time loop of war and despair, a perfect engine to generate tribute for the Hive god of cunning. In the background of these events, a ghost found Uldren Sov's body, and seeing the spark of a noble soul, resurrected him. With no memory of his past life as Uldren, he would become the Guardian, known as Crow. Drawn by the traveler's reawakening and the events in the Dreaming City, a new pyramid ship, a vessel of the Black Fleet, appeared, buried deep beneath the surface of our own moon. Its presence caused our past traumas and greatest foes to rise as a spectral, scarlet-hued nightmares. Guided by Eris Morn, who knew the moon's darkness better than anyone, the Guardian faced these phantoms. We confronted the ghosts of Crota, Gaul, the Scorn Barons, and others, not just to defeat them, but to understand them, and in doing so, to understand ourselves. We ventured inside the pyramid, and for the first time, we communed directly with the darkness itself. It spoke to us, not as a monster, but as a teacher. It offered us a gift, a promise of salvation, a chilling invitation to cast our lot with it. The witness had finally made its presence known directly, beginning its campaign of temptation. Its words were followed by its physical arrival. An armada of pyramid ships descended upon our system, swallowing the planets Io, Titan, Mercury, and Mars into gravitational anomalies, removing them from our sky. A new pyramid on Jupiter's frozen moon, Europa, called to us. There we found Aramis, the ship stealer, a fallen Kel, who sought to unite the Elixni houses under her banner and build a new empire on Europa, using the power of the darkness itself, Stasis. To fight her, we were forced to do the unthinkable. Guided by the exo-stranger, revealed to be Elizabeth Elsie Bray, granddaughter of Clovis and sister of Anna, a mysterious woman from a dark future where the light had failed, we took the power of Stasis into our own hands. We learned to wield the darkness, walking a fine line between salvation and corruption. We defeated Aramis and her stasis-wielding council, but the line between light and dark had been blurred forever. The architect of so much suffering, the master of deception, Savathun, the Witch Queen, finally made her grand move. After a year of masquerading as the warlock Osiris and manipulating the vanguard from within, her deception was revealed. She was captured by Queen Marasov and imprisoned in a crystal prison in the Dreaming City. Mara, with the help of her Tekeyuns, performed a ritual to exorcise Savathun's worm, a process that would kill her but free Mara from the curse on her city. The ritual was successful, but Savathun, ever the master of bargains, had orchestrated events so that in the moment of her death, she was found worthy by the traveler. She was resurrected by a ghost named Emaru. Savathun, the god of cunning, returned with her own army of light-wielding Hive guardians, the Lucent Brood, each with their own ghost and the powers of the light. Her throne world, a mindscape of lies and secrets, appeared in our system. To uncover how this was possible, the Guardian entered her domain. Using a new power called Deep Sight, which allowed us to perceive memories and hidden truths, we unraveled her web of lies. We discovered the ultimate truth, a secret Savathun herself had only recently uncovered. The witness had lied to the Hive from the very beginning. It was the witness, not the traveler, that had orchestrated the events that led to the syzygy on Fundament. The Leviathan's warnings were true. The traveler had originally come to Fundament to uplift the Krill. The worm gods and the sword logic were a trap, and in a final, stunning revelation, we learned that Savathun had not stolen the light. The traveler, now free of the witness's influence and acting on its own accord, had chosen to give it to her, just as it had once chosen us. We defeated Savathun, but her ghost, Emaru, escaped. Before her final defeat, she warned us that the witness was coming and that she had hidden the final piece of its puzzle, a powerful paracausal artifact called the Veil. The witness and its new disciple, the resurrected and empowered Emperor Kalis, arrived in Sol. Their target was the Veil, hidden in a secret, technologically advanced city on Neptune called Neomuna. This city had survived the collapse in complete isolation, protected by its own nanotech-enhanced warriors, the Cloud Striders. The Guardian raced to Neomuna to stop Callus and the Witness. We discovered the Veil, a source of consciousness and reality, deeply connected to the Traveler. We allied with the Cloud Striders and learned to wield a new darkness power, Strand, the psychic weave of reality itself. Despite our best efforts, Callus and his Shadow Legion created a conduit to the Veil. The Witness, using our own ghost as a link against its will, connected the Veil on Neptune to the Traveler orbiting Earth. It used this link to tear a massive triangular portal on the surface of the Traveler. And then, as we watched, helpless, the Witness and its pyramid fleet passed through the portal, physically entering the Traveler to begin its work on enacting the final shape. Following the Witness into the portal, the Guardian, along with Ikora, Zavala, and Crow, entered the pale heart of the Traveler. This was not a physical place, but a surreal, metaphysical dimension shaped by the Traveler's memories and the Witness's encroaching influence. It was a long, winding path through twisted recreations of places the Traveler had visited, from the Black Garden to the Cosmodrome and the Tower. They were joined by a spectral, memory-perfect echo of the late Cade 6, a manifestation of the Traveler's own memory of him, who served as their guide. Here, the Witness's ultimate goal became terrifyingly clear: to use its immense power to calcify reality, to freeze the entire universe into a single, perfect, unchanging moment of its own design. A universe without choice, without change, without pain, but also without life. It was here that the true origin of the Witness was revealed. It was not a single being, but an entire civilization that had, eons ago, been the first race to discover the Traveler. They became obsessed with its power and its purpose, but were horrified by the chaos, pain, and randomness it fostered. Believing existence to be inherently flawed, they yearned for a world of meaning and stability. Through a ritual of immense power, they sacrificed their individuality, fusing their entire populace into a single, unified consciousness to bring order to the universe. They became the Witness. The final confrontation was not a battle of might, but of philosophy. While fighting through the Witness's fused legions, the subjugators, who wielded both Stasis and Strand, the Guardian realized that the Witness's singular, deterministic logic was its greatest weakness. The combined forces of the Vanguard and their allies, humanity, the Elixni of House Light, the Cabal Empress Kyatal, Savathun's Lucent Hive, and even the Vex, held the line against the Witness's forces on a metaphysical battlefield. Empowered by the collective will of all those who defied this final, absolute end, the Guardian, with their ghost, confronted the monolith of the Witness. They did not just destroy it. They connected with it, overwhelming its singular, unified consciousness with the infinite, chaotic, painful, and beautiful possibilities of existence. Every choice, every life, every moment of joy and sorrow. In its final moments, the Witness saw the flaw in its perfect design, the meaning it had overlooked in the chaos. Its unified form unraveled, the millions of faces that composed it crying out in unison as their singular purpose dissolved. The entity that had terrorized the universe for billions of years simply ceased to be. The war between light and darkness, the game between Gardener and Winnower, was over. The universe was saved, not by enforcing one truth over another, but by embracing the infinite complexity the Gardener had championed in the first garden. The Traveler was wounded but alive, and humanity, along with its allies, now faced a new era, a destiny forged not by gods or cosmic principles, but by their own hands. And so, silence. The eternal war between light and darkness, the conflict that defined our very existence from the moment our ghost first found us, is over. The witness is gone. Its final, perfect shape was denied, unraveled not by a more powerful weapon, but by the infinite, chaotic, beautiful possibilities of a universe that refuses to be silent. The traveler is wounded, but free. The allies we made, Elixni, Cabal, even the lucent Hive, stand with us in the quiet aftermath. Humanity is safe. But in this quiet, a new and far more complex question emerges. The singular focus of our long war is gone. For centuries, our purpose was simple: survive the coming storm. Now, the storm has broken, and we remain. We are guardians who have wielded stasis. We have mastered Strand. We have stared into the abyss and have not only survived, but have drawn strength from it. The hard line between what is light and what is dark has been blurred into a hazy, uncertain twilight. In this new era, without a singular, cosmic enemy to unite us, what does it mean to be a guardian? Where is the line now? And who are we, if not soldiers in a holy war? To understand the path that now stretches before us, we must look back. This is not the first time guardians have grappled with these questions. To truly comprehend our future, we must first exhume the ghosts of our past. For a new saga begins by understanding the legends that came before. We must tell a story not of cosmic forces, but of a shadow that was born within our own ranks. A heresy that laid the philosophical foundation for the very dilemma we now face. This is the story of the first renegades. A story that begins not with a villain, but with one of the greatest heroes the city has ever known. Our tale begins with a titan named Rezel Azir. He was a champion, a bulwark against the darkness, renowned for his strength and valor during the brutal faction wars that plagued the early city. His hand cannon, named Rose, was a symbol of hope, its every shot a declaration of the light's power. But Rezel was curious, and his curiosity would be his undoing. He became obsessed with the Hive, with understanding the nature of the enemy he fought so relentlessly. Against the warnings of his ghost, he made frequent secret trips to the moon, delving deep into the Hive's territory, studying their corrupting magic. On one fateful journey, he confronted a powerful Hive knight. Upon his victory, he took a chitinous shard from the knight's armor, and in a moment of grim fascination, affixed it to his beloved cannon, Rose. This was the first step on a dark path. The whispers began soon after. The shard, imbued with Hive sorcery, began to corrupt the weapon, and through the weapon, it corrupted Rezel himself. His ghost pleaded with him, sensing the change, the growing coldness in his light. But Rezel was convinced he was in control, that he was simply learning the enemy's strength to better defeat it. He was wrong. His armor began to darken, his thoughts grew predatory. The hope he once embodied curdled into a cynical, nihilistic philosophy. He came to believe that true strength lay not in the light alone, but in the willingness to embrace the shadows. He shed the name Rezel Azir, a name synonymous with heroism, and adopted a new title, a name from an ancient, forgotten language that meant the eternal abyss. He became Dredgen Yor, and his cannon, Rose, once a symbol of hope, was now twisted and barbed, a conduit of poison and death. It too took a new name, Thorn. Yor became a legend of a different kind, a boogeyman whispered about by ghosts and guardians. He was the first guardian known to have killed another guardian in cold blood. He was a heretic, a monster. His story reached its climax at the small, fledgling settlement of Palamon. There, another legendary guardian, Jaren Ward, a hunter, and the wielder of the last word, tracked Yor down. In the dusty streets of the town, the two faced off. But this was not a duel between equals. Yor's corrupted light and his cursed weapon were too much. Jaren Ward was murdered, and in an act of unimaginable cruelty, Yor destroyed his ghost. But the event was witnessed by a young boy, a boy Jaren Ward had been protecting. named Shin Malphur. As Yor departed, Jaren's ghost, with its dying light, offered the last word to the boy. In that moment, a legacy was passed, and a vow of vengeance was forged. Shin Malphur would spend years training, mastering the light, driven by a singular purpose: to hunt down the man who had murdered his mentor. Their final confrontation took place at Dwindler's Ridge. Yor, arrogant and powerful, faced the man he had made an orphan. But Shin had a power Yor could not comprehend. Fueled by righteous fury and a perfect clarity of purpose, Shin Malphur ignited his light in a way no one had before. He manifested the first golden gun, and with 3 shots of pure solar fire, he reduced the infamous Dredgen Yor to ash. One might think the story ends there. The monster was slain, the hero avenged. But Yor's evil was a seed, and it had been planted in the minds of other guardians. He had left behind writings, a philosophy that painted him not as a monster, but as a misunderstood pioneer. A new group of guardians, disillusioned with the Vanguard's strict dogma, began to secretly study his teachings. They believed Yor was right, that the light alone was not enough. They called themselves the Shadows of Yor. To the outside world, they were heretics. To each other, they were renegades. These were not weak guardians. They were some of the strongest among their peers. Figures like Tebin Gray and Callum Sol, who adopted the Dredgen title as a badge of honor. They sought to redeem the name, to prove they could succeed where Yor had failed, to control the very power that had consumed him. But they were being watched, they were being hunted, and their hunter was a legend known only as the man with the golden gun. This figure systematically eliminated Shadows of Yor, who strayed too far, who began to kill innocents, whose curiosity curdled into cruelty. This hunter was, of course, Shin Malphur, and here lies the greatest secret of this dark chapter. Shin Malphur, the ultimate purist, was also one of the founding members of the Shadows of Yor. The entire movement was his creation. It was a grand, century-long deception. He established the group under a secret identity, an alias that would allow him to become a leader among these renegades, to test their resolve. This persona, this false identity he wore, was Dredgen Vale. As Dredgen Vale, Shin played the part perfectly. He spoke of Yor's strength. He encouraged the study of the darkness, and he earned the trust of the other shadows. But his true purpose was to hunt them from the inside. He used his position to identify which members were truly seeking balance, and which were simply hungry for power, before they could become another Dredgen Yor. The tragic story of Callum Sol is a prime example. Callum was a shadow who came dangerously close to creating a perfect replica of Thorn. Shin, as Dredgen Vale, tested Callum, a confrontation which ended with Callum's final death. The corrupted weapon Callum was creating was later found, and with the help of the Drifter, was repurposed. It became Malfeasance, a permanent symbol of Callum's fall and Shin's secret war. This brings us to the modern era and to the enigmatic Drifter. His game, Gambit, is not just a game. It is the evolution of Shin Malphur's test, teaching a new generation how to handle the darkness without falling. And Shin Malphur, Dredgen Vale himself, was watching. He watched the Drifter, and he watched us, the player guardian. His long con was a test to see if any guardian could finally succeed, where the original renegades had failed. And now, in this new age, after the final shape was averted, the story of the renegades is more relevant than ever. It is the philosophical foundation for our future. We are the generation that Shin Malphur was waiting for. We have wielded the powers of darkness and retained our identity, our purpose. The cautionary tale of Dredgen Yor's fall, and the hard-learned lessons of Shin Malphur's secret war, have led us to this moment. In a universe free from the Witness's shadow, we are all faced with the same choices the renegades were, but now, we are armed with the knowledge of their failures and their triumphs. The next chapter of what it means to be a guardian is unwritten, and it is ours to define.